proactive move aimed at meeting the unexpected huge skills necessity in the nation's privatized power sector, the federal government launched the National Power Sector Apprenticeship Scheme, an initiative that will afford Nigerians an opportunity to be trained in several aspects of power generation, distribution and transmission. How the scheme will function is the focus of this week's edition of the program. Hello there, glad to have you join us on the program this week. I'm Gloria Umezuike. The completion of the privatization of the nation's power sector brought a whole new challenge, and that is the issue of manpower for the sector. Here we're talking about artisans, linesmen, joiners, fitters and machinists. And now to ensure that the new investors don't bring expatriates to handle these jobs, the federal government decided to introduce the National Power Sector Apprenticeship Scheme, an initiative geared towards training the required manpower for the new power sector. While the scheme will use the platform of the National Power Training Institute of Nigeria for the training. Well, this week, the Director General of the Institute expatiates more on this. But up ahead, the federal government says for 15 years there has been no recruitment on the nation's power sector. And now the federal government is bridging that gap. 7,400 trainees drawn from the 36 states of the Federation and Abuja are taking part in the first phase of the National Power Sector Apprenticeship Scheme. You take a listen.
Secretary to the Government of the Federation steps in to represent President Goodluck Jonathan to flag off the National Power Sector Apprenticeship Scheme. He has come to address over 7,400 Nigerian youths who will fill the gap in the human capital needed in the power sector following the privatization program.
The National Power Sector Apprenticeship Scheme is an important aspect of our drive to provide meaningful employment opportunities for the Nigerian youth. Indeed, it will provide an enabling environment for the development of skills required to underpin the reforms and growth of the power sector. Today's ceremony, therefore, marks a major step forward in the realization of our vision for improved employment of the Nigerian youth.
The training areas will include electrical feeders, cable jointers, climbers and substation operators, and the trainees are drawn from school certificate, OND, HND, NCE and degree holders from all states of the Federation. The Minister of Power decries the inadequate human capital and human capacity in the power sector, which has become more acute following the reforms. He wonders why, for over 23 years, Nigeria has not trained anyone, same way it has allowed equipment to rotten.
Presently, there is a huge deficit, especially in the technical workforce at the moment. Among them, technicians, artisans and craftsmen who account for less than 20% of the entire workforce.
Goodwill messages came from the National Assembly, development partners, the Federal Capital Territory and the state governors, all of them urging the youth to grab the lifetime opportunity.
Mr. President, we greatly applaud your concern for the youth of this country, which you have demonstrated by empowering them through the SHOPI program and now the NAPSAS program.
For any government of any country to think of progressive development, be it sequential or otherwise, the first port of call is to assist or ensure that the youths are duly empowered.
The beneficiaries have already been taken in for the training. Who knows, in the next few months, they will be among the ones that Nigerians will begin to trust in the effort to enjoy steady power supply.
Well, let's now join the Director General of the National Power Training Institute of Nigeria, Engineer Ruben Okeke. Engineer Ruben Okeke, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you, Gloria.
Well, just recently, the National Economic Council approved about 1.3 billion for manpower development and training of over 3,000 trainees, under the National Power Sector Apprenticeship Scheme. Now, really, let's understand the full concept of the scheme.
The 1.3 billion naira approved by the Economic Council was actually to train 3,700 Nigerian youths under the National Power Sector Apprenticeship Scheme called NAPSAS. And the federal government, Mr. President, recognized the fact that even though the sector has been privatized, the workers within the sector have aged, and the craftsmen and the technicians are no longer there. And in order to achieve its purpose, it has to do an intervention in human capital development. And therefore, the NAPSAP scheme initiative of the Federal Minister of Power, Professor Chinedu Nebo, who thought out about it and took it to Mr. President, and he got it approved, is for us to train and bridge the gap, the widening gap that is existing in the sector as far as the human capital for technicians, craftsmen are concerned. When we mention technicians and craftsmen, we're talking of cable jointers. We are talking of linesmen, those that climb poles and draw the line overhead, and those that install the substations. We're talking of electrical fitters, the people that install the small transformers, the big transformers, the breakers. We are talking as well as the district substation operators. District substation operators are those that man the injection substations. They run shift. Even if you produce the electricity, you have to wheel it, you have to transport it. And when it comes to the distribution end, somebody still has to switch on the breaker, take it off when it's required before it can get to the customers. So these four categories of staff are no longer there. First, disengagement in the sector due to privatization saw many of them out. Secondly, even before they left, they've aged. So the NAPSAS program is to fast-track provision of this cadre of workers, because without them, the light cannot get to the customers, both in operation and in maintenance.
But you see, over the years, for several decades, the power sector has just been running without necessary skills, manpower skills and all of that, Why did it take this long for the government to realize that we needed such schemes in place?
Well, just like every other thing that happened, the infrastructure itself was decaying and nobody was paying attention to it. Human capital as well. Since 1998, when the idea of privatization started, an embargo was, introduced in engaging workers in the power sector, in NEPA or PSCN then. So, because they want to privatize and there is no need bringing in workers. So from 1998 till now, there has not been any structured recruitment. And again, since 1989, there has not been any structured training. Why did it take the government such a long time? Because the required resource that needed to get the workers trained was not forthcoming. Just like government was not putting enough into the infrastructure. So the training couldn't have developed on its own. Everything has to be total. But right now, the present administration identified power as their priority. And the whole three factors that will get light to your house have to be focused on. First is the fuel. Second is the fiscal infrastructure. And the third is the human capital. So government is tackling all the three at the same time. And that is why they have brought in the human capital to come on board. Because without the human capital, the other two cannot work.
So what's the role of NAPTIN in all of this?
Now, NAPTIN is established by the federal government as well for training. There is no other thing NAPTIN is to do than to train the workers in the sector. That is our mandate. And of course, before a worker can work, he must have to be trained. So NAPTIN, ever it was established, 2009, March to be precise, started with intervention training. Now we have introduced training of the engineers, because if you graduate from the university, a BSc holder or HND holder in electrical or mechanical engineering, you still need this skill development before you are allowed to operate any of the switch gears within the power sector. And therefore, NAPTIN is the only institute right now fully owned by the government that is charged with this assignment. So the role of NAPTIN is to ensure that the human capital is competent enough to operate and manage the physical infrastructure expansion in the sector.
Okay, so far, how many people have you trained?
Well, we have trained about, up to 2012, December, it was 5,441, but that is a mixed growth. We have the technical and non-technical, but about 75% of that is technical. Now, from 2000